Okay, guys. Chapter 18, Detectives in Togas, a banquet. Strangely, Antonius remained away much more than an hour. His friends were fuming mad because all the time he was away, they had to sit boring themselves with solace. They looked out on the street more than they did at their books, and now and then one of them would dash outside to see whether Antonius was in sight yet. When 2 hours had passed, Xanthippus also grew uneasy and called the boys in. I had my doubts from the start about entrusting Antonius with such an important mission, he said. Probably he is lazing around the forum looking at shops. If he doesn't come soon, you will have to go out to look for him. But no sooner had he spoken than the curtain was pulled aside and Antonius appeared in the doorway. He presented an amazing appearance. Perched askew on his head was a crushed wreath of flowers, which had slipped down over his forehead. His sandals were missing, and over his shoulders hung a man's cloak that was far too big for him. "Hello, my friends," he greeted them. "If you only knew what I've been through, ha 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 ha." He started singing, spread out his arms, and whirled in a circle. "You good-for-nothing rascal, what have you been up to?" Xanthippus thundered. Antonius pulled the cloak from his shoulders and held it out to Xanthippus. "The cloak, the chain," he stammered. "Here's the chain you pulled off the burglar's neck." From the collar of the cloak dangled the golden chain the boys had found under the wardrobe. "So it is," Xanthippus murmured in amazement. "This is it. You can even see the place where the hook was straightened out." He fixed Antonius with a questioning look. "To whom does this cloak belong?" "Tell us," Antonius said. Xanthippus frowned. "What?" he cried out. "How did you come by Tellus's cloak?" "It's the strangest story you have ever heard," Antonius began to laugh. "Did you go to see Tellus at all?" Mucius asked. "Of course," Antonius replied. "It was marvelous. I had a wonderful time. At the end, they even wanted to kill me." Tell us, what happened?" all the boys cried at once. "Where are the names?" Julius asked. "I don't have them. They weren't listed." Xanthippus was still staring at the cloak and chains, shaking his head. "How do you know this is Tellus's cloak?" he asked. "I stole it from his bedroom," Antonius replied. "How in the world did you get into Tellus's bedroom?" "Well, it was this way," Antonius began. Tellus had visitors. There were 8 gentlemen with him. They were sprawling around the table on couches and eating. The doorman didn't want to let me in, so I gave him the letter and the 10 sesterces, and then he told me to wait. He left me outside in front of the door, and I was mad because he didn't take me into the great hall. But a few minutes later, Tellus himself came waddling toward me, the letter in his hand. He's small and fat and bald, and there's a big scar on his head. He was wearing a golden laurel wreath and looked like Bacchus. Right away, he was nice to me as could be. He said he was so happy to meet me and asked me in. I said I was happy too and started looking for the marble wall. But Tellus hurried me through so fast that I had no time to read the names. What a place he lives in. I've never seen the like of it in all my life. Everything gold and marble and pictures and rugs and hundreds of slaves. The emperor can't have any grander place. Tellus took me to a big room where his guests were, and they were a bit surprised when he brought me in. He introduced me as his young friend, and then all of them acted as though they were pleased to see me. They were wearing wreaths of flowers, which made them look awfully funny. Tellus invited me to dine with them, and said with a laugh, "The dinner was planned for 9, but I guess we'll be 10 for a while." At once, several slaves rushed up to me, took off my sandals, washed my feet, and stuck a wreath on my head. Tellus sat me on the middle couch as guest of honor. A slave tied a napkin around me, and other slaves came with bowls and plates and gold spoons and knives, and still other slaves with the strangest foods you've ever saw. People laughed because I didn't know how to eat the stuff, and they explained to me what the different things were and how I was supposed to eat them. There were flamingo tongues in wine sauce, and wild boar snout with truffles, and locusts in honey, and frog's legs with mushrooms served in snow, and awfully cold. An ostrich egg omelet and antelope roast. And on top of all that, there were walnuts and apples and grapes and figs. After every bite I took, a slave wiped my mouth. One slave gave me a bowl of water. I thought I was supposed to drink it, but he whispered to me I was to dip my fingers into it. I liked the way the different things tasted, especially the locusts. They were nice and crackly. Togas told me he would have to discuss the letter with me later. But we never got around to that because after the meal, more wines were brought. They were all wines I'd never heard of. White and yellow, heavy and light, and then some bitter stuff that was green. Togas kept drinking to me, and I drank to him, but I could only sip the stuff. And then the men drank to me, and I did some more sipping to them. The men started telling stories, and I had to tell a funny story too, but I couldn't think of any. So I told how we found our teacher in the wardrobe, bound and gagged. They all roared with laughter about that, Togas most of all. Suddenly there was music, a whole orchestra playing, but I couldn't see it because it was behind a curtain. Flutes trilling, harps and lyres twanging, trumpets singing out, and drums booming. And in between there would be a big crash as though somebody was smashing all the dishes, and they would all play at once. Then actors came in and recited something I didn't understand because it was in Greek. I can speak and read Greek in school, but I can't understand it. Dancers hopped around as though they had all stomach aches. But the clowns were awfully funny, and I roared with laughter. But then laughing made me feel sick, and everything started whirling in my head, and all of a sudden I remembered that maybe I wouldn't be able to read the names on the walls. And after that, I didn't even dare sip any more wine. "Why didn't you leave?" Flavius interrupted. "I wanted to, but Togas wouldn't let me go. Finally, I pretended that I had to go out because I was going to be sick. And then they all laughed, and Togas laughed too and told a slave to take me out. We went into the great hall, and I stopped in front of the marble wall and tried to find the 20th of March, but I couldn't find it. The slave started getting impatient, so I said I wanted to write my name down. I was trying to gain time. The slave gave a funny laugh and asked, "Why, who do you think you are?" I said, "Don't you know I am the guest of honor today?" And he said, "But you're only a little boy." So I shouted at him, "What are you thinking of? I am not a little boy. I'm the emperor's nephew." That scared him, and he ran off to get paint and a brush, and I felt good because I'd fooled him. I found the 20th of March, but there were no names under it. The date was crossed out. "Aha," Xanthippus said, "the feast was canceled." "And how did you get away?" Flavius and Caius could hardly wait to find out. "I wanted to escape," Antonius continued, "but I was afraid the doorkeeper wouldn't let me out. So I ran down a corridor because I saw a garden at the end of it. But there were slaves in the garden, so I ran back along the corridor. But there were more slaves coming from the other side. So I scooted into a room and I closed the door. I wanted to climb out the window, but there were panes of glass in it. I heard voices on the other side of the door and thought of crawling under the bed. There was a big bed in the room, but it was too close to the floor and I couldn't squeeze under. So I hid behind a cloak hanging in a niche. I heard the slaves talking. One of them said, "Maybe he is in here." Another answered, "You know the master has forbidden us on the pain of death to enter his bedroom without permission." "But what shall we do if the boy is in there?" The first slave said, and the other said, "Let us lock the door and go ask our master what to do." They went away, and I thought, now I'm going to be killed for entering here without permission. It was awfully exciting. I looked out from behind the cloak and bumped my nose against the chain. I recognized it at once and thought, now I've got to get away, and I've got to take this cloak with me. So I wound it good and thick around my right arm, knocked out the window glass with it, and jumped. Luckily, the window gave right on the street, and I ran like mad. Antonius came to a breathless stop and stood looking at his friends like a victorious gladiator. "You have done very well," Xanthippus praised him. Antonius beamed. Xanthippus looked questioningly at his pupils. Strange, he said. How did the chain come to be fastened to Tellus's cloak? You boys had it last, didn't you? We left it with Leucos when we ran away, Julius said. Then Tellus must have got it from Leucos, Xanthippus said, shaking his head in puzzlement. That means the two have dealings with each other. It also means that Leucos must have known who the owner of the chain was. Xanthippus looked the cloak over again. It is a valuable camel hair cloak, he said, unfolding it and weighing the fabric in his hand, the kind ranking officers in the Orient usually wear. The chain also comes from the Orient, as you can tell by the hieroglyphics. Tellus spent many years in the Orient. There can be no doubt that the cloak belongs to him. Then it was Tellus who broke in here and attacked you, Mucius said. Xanthippus raised his eyebrows. As a rule, pensioned generals don't go in for burglary, he said. But this is an exception, evidently. Perhaps someone borrowed the cloak from him, Julius suggested. People do not borrow cloaks from generals, Xanthippus remarked. The cloak belongs to Tellus. Incredible as it seems, he is our suspect. He also sent the courier to the newspaper. And why did he suddenly call off his banquet? What can we do now? Mucius asked. Xanthippus pondered and did not answer. We ought to accuse him publicly from the speaker's platform in the forum, Julius said. We'll scream like the cranes of Ibycus, Antonius proposed. Or we'll write on all the walls, Ex-consul Tellus is the murderer of Rufus Protonus, said Publius. But Rufus hasn't been murdered, Flavius objected. No matter, said Publius. Anyone in prison is as good as dead. Give me my sandals, my cloak, and my stick, Xanthippus said suddenly. I know what I must do. The boys brought him his things and looked at him eagerly. I am going to see Tellus and tell him to his face that he is the evildoer, Xanthippus declared resolutely. Aren't you afraid? Flavius asked. Xanthippus' eyes flashed. The man who desires the good must combat evil, he said grimly. And he began unwinding the bandage from his leg. Then he put on his sandals. I shall ask him why he assaulted me, why he stole my writings on Pythagoras and my treatise on the acute angles of an obtuse triangle. I shall demand that he procure Rufus's release at once and threaten, if he refuses, to publish the whole story in the newspaper tomorrow morning. That will frighten him. Politicians fear public opinion beyond all else. Come on, help me into my cloak. Mucius and Julius draped the cloak around his shoulders. Xanthippus took up his stick and straightened like a soldier coming to attention. You wait here for me. If I am not back in 2 hours, inform the police. He started toward the door. Wait, Mucius cries. I had just thought of something. Xanthippus turned. What is it? He asked, frowning. Remember you told us that you struggled with the man who attacked you? Mucius said, the words coming out in a rush. Xanthippus nodded impatiently. Well, was the fellow tall or short? Tall. Why? He was at least a head taller than I am. But Tellus is short, Mucius said, shorter than you. That's true, Antonius said. He's small and fat, and you're tall and thin. Xanthippus hesitated for a moment. Then he came back into the room and sat down again. Take off my cloak, he said. After a long pause, he murmured, Tellus is short. The burglar was tall. How is that possible? A short man cannot be tall, Caius said. Xanthippus said nothing. The boys also were silent. Suddenly they heard footsteps in the classroom. Someone approached the curtain and remained standing behind it, breathing loudly. There's someone there, Flavius whispered. Someone where? Xanthippus asked, startled. Someone is at the door, Mucius said. Who's there? Xanthippus called sternly. Here I am, a gentle, deep voice replied, and an old man entered. He was dressed in rags, his bare feet covered by miserable shoes made of bark. Gravely he looked at Xanthippus and the boys and said, Greetings. Greetings, Xanthippus replied. Who are you? Are you the pupils of the Xanthos school? The old man asked. My name is Xanthos, Xanthippus replied. I come from prison and bring you a message from Rufus, the old man said in a slow, weary voice. The boys instantly thronged around him, all saying at once, From prison? How is Rufus? Still living, the man replied. I was fettered to him by the same chain. He raised his skinny arms and showed his wrists, bruised and swollen. I was released today. Has Rufus been released also? Mucius asked softly. The old man shook his head sorrowfully. No. He is waiting to be taken to trial, but nobody is paying the least attention to him. He lay beside me on the damp stone floor. We received almost nothing to eat or drink for days. But he has never cried. He is a brave boy. Only at night have I heard him sobbing. The boys looked down at the floor. Were you able to talk to Rufus? Xanthippus asked, clearing his throat several times. Not often, the old man replied. We were closely guarded, and no one is permitted to speak. You are beaten if you say so much as a word. When the guards came and removed my chains, Rufus sat up and looked pleadingly at me, as though he wanted to say something he did not dare. Then, as I was being led out, he suddenly shouted after me, Go to the Xanthus school. Tell my friends they must tear the sheep's clothing off the red wolf. That was all he could say, for a guard furiously lashed out at him with a stick. I came here at once to bring you his message. Tear the sheep's clothing off the red wolf. What it means you will know better than I, but make haste. It cannot be more frightful in Hades than it is in prison. Greetings. The old man bowed and left as suddenly as he had appeared. Xanthippus and his pupils stared after him in perplexity. The meaning of Rufus's message was an utter mystery. We are to tear the sheep's clothing off the red wolf, Julius murmured. What was he getting at? That the red wolf is wearing sheep's clothing, Caius said. Idiot, Mucius rebuked him. First we must know what he means by the red wolf. All the boys looked hopefully at Xanthippus. Do you know who the wolf could be? Mucius asked respectfully. I don't know anything about a wolf, their teacher replied. Why is the wolf red? Flavius pondered. I don't know anything about a red wolf either, Xanthippus said crossly. Maybe the sheep's clothing can help us somehow, Julius suggested cautiously. The wolf in sheep's clothing is an old fable, Xanthippus replied. We will be taking it up when school starts again. The boys found little consolation in this reminder. They went on speculating. The red wolf is the culprit, Julius decided. But what has that to do with Tellus, Mucius said. Tellus isn't a red wolf. And Tellus is short, not tall, Caius reminded him. I can't understand why Rufus did not give us the right name, Publius said. He must know it. Be quiet, Xanthippus interrupted them. We must think this through step by step. Rufus did not say the real name because he did not want the guards to understand, for fear they would run and warn the criminal. That again proves that the culprit is an important personage. Rufus is still worried about his father. Not even the torments of prison would make him endanger his father's position. He must have spent a lot of time working out that message to us. The guards couldn't possibly know who was meant by the red wolf, but Rufus assumes we will see it immediately. Unfortunately, we cannot, and therefore his message is of no help to us. We are in a blind alley. Let me think. It's maddening, Mucius said with a sigh, and his words expressed the feelings of all the boys. It never occurred to him or to any of the others that the answer to the riddle lay right outside the window. The boys stared at Xanthippus, waiting for some inspiration from him, but now even Xanthippus was stumped. It was growing darker outside, and violent gusts of wind rattled the shutters. Then it began to pour. Antonius went to the window and peered out unhappily. Suddenly, he crouched down and called out in a low voice, There's Tellus across the street. Chapter 19, The Bakery. Where? The others cried and were making a dash for the window when Antonius warned them back. Keep down so he won't see you. They ducked down to the floor, crawled to the window, and then peered cautiously over the sill. Xanthippus, too, hugging the wall, had made his way to the window. Where do you see him? They asked. Over there, Antonius whispered. On the other side of the street, a short, fat man was walking rapidly in the direction of the forum. He was wearing a cloak with a hood, which he had drawn over his head. How do you know he is Tellus? Mucius asked in a low voice. I recognized him right away, Antonius said. His hood blew off for a moment, and I saw his bald head and the scar. I'll swear it's him. He glanced over here, too, but he didn't see me. Probably he's going to visit Lukos, Xanthippus murmured. But Tellus walked past Lukos's house and stopped 3 houses further down the street, in front of a bakery. He turned around, took a long look at Xanthos' school, and then vanished inside the baker's shop. He's gone to buy some rolls, Flavius exclaimed in amazement. Xanthippus bobbled his head, sat down on it, bobbled to his bed, and sat down on it and began rubbing his leg. In straightening up from the floor, he had moved too quickly and hurt himself again. The boys gathered around in concern, but the pain seemed to ease up. Then their teacher gave them this verdict. A millionaire does not go out himself to buy rolls, he said. In fact, he hardly goes anywhere without his slaves and hangers-on. All this is very suspicious. Perhaps Tullus has discovered the disappearance of the cloak and chain and is going to confer with somebody there. Meeting the Red Wolf, Antonius exclaimed. Xanthippus shrugged. Whoever it is, it would be interesting to find out what he is doing there. I'll run over and look, Mucius suggested. No, Xanthippus said, it would be very dangerous for you to go alone. A cornered criminal will stop at nothing. It is better for you all to go together. When there are 6 of you, you are much safer. But stick together all the time and be careful. If you are threatened, get out. I don't want any foolish heroism. Mucius, Antonius, Caius, and Julius ran off, wild with enthusiasm. Publius followed them with a mocking expression. He thought nothing would come of this whole undertaking. As usual, Flavius brought up the rear. The cloudburst had turned the roadway into a rushing stream. The boys hopped across by way of the raised blocks of stone which were placed in the roadway at regular intervals, making a bridge from one sidewalk to the other for the use of pedestrians during such storms as this. They raced down the sidewalk and charged into the bakery like the Persians into the pass at Thermopylae. The baker, who was busy kneading some dough in a trough beside his oven, looked up in astonishment. Hey, have you kids gone crazy? He asked good-naturedly. Are you planning to conquer Carthage for the 2nd time? Or is school out? He knew the boys well, for they were good customers of his. They always came around during the breakfast recess and bought piles of rolls and stacks of cookies. Tellus was nowhere in sight. The boys went all over the shop looking for him, while the baker watched them in wonder. Whatever became of that short fat man who was in here a while ago? The one in the hooded cloak, Mucius asked. The baker laughed. Oh, him, he replied, pointing to a door in the back of the shop. He just went on through there.